You'll want to choose the version if you're using Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. I'm using Windows, so I'll download that and install it. So hopefully by now you have OBS Studio installed. If you do, we can move on to the next step, which will be configuring OBS for live streaming. Alright, so I've gone ahead and launched OBS, and don't worry if it looks a little intimidating at first. I'm going to walk you through every single step here to get this set up. And once it's set up, you really won't have to configure very much to be able to live stream. So let's go ahead and go down here to the bottom right and let's click on Settings. There isn't really anything here in the general panel that we need to change right now, so let's move on over to Stream. We want to make sure that we choose Streaming Services for our stream type. Then we want to choose our service. If you're using Twitch, you could select Twitch, but I'm going to be using YouTube/YouTube Gaming. I want to make sure server is set to primary YouTube ingest server. And then stream key, we're going to need to come back to this later, but this is where you would input your stream key if you were doing an event live stream or a quick live stream. The quick live stream will have the same stream key all the time. Your event stream key can vary, so make sure to remember that the stream key is very important when you're live streaming. We can move on down to output. Now remember earlier I mentioned you wanted to remember that video bitrate of 3000 to 6000. We got that from the YouTube help page here. So right now it's set to 2500 and YouTube recommends 3000 to 6000, so what should we really set it to? I recommend that you go to an internet speed testing website like speedtest.net and go ahead and run the test. So in this particular test I got 41 megs for my download speed and I got 6 megs for my upload speed. So we could set this as high as 6000K because there's 1000 kilobytes in a megabyte. But we don't necessarily need to set it to 6000. 6000 would be the maximum. That's if you want the absolute maximum video quality for that range. And at a certain point, the quality is going to be good enough. So all this is really going to do is just eat up more of your bandwidth and eat up more of your computer processing power and more hard drive space if you're going to archive the video. So I would recommend setting it lower than the maximum. I keep this set at around 4000 and I think my live streams look pretty good. Since I'm doing mainly drawing on screen and there isn't a lot of motion in the video, I can get away with a lower bitrate. So you can feel free to experiment with this. If you find that your live streams are a little laggy and that they start and stop a lot while people are watching them, you may want to set this a bit lower, especially if you have a slow internet connection. If you find that even the lower end of this doesn't work and your live stream is still laggy, you may want to use a different resolution and go with something lower like 720 rather than 1080. The encoder we want to set to X264. The audio bitrate, YouTube recommends we set this to 128. If you wanted higher quality audio, you could set it a little bit higher if you wanted to, but again, that eats up more bandwidth. The recording path is where we're going to record our archived videos to, so you can record an offline copy at the same time as your live stream. So this is the location of where you want that file to go. Recording quality we can change if you want it to be the same as the stream, or you can make it high quality, lossless quality, and so on. I'm just going to leave this same as stream. The recording format I'm going to change. I prefer the MP4 format. So that's it for the output page. Let's go on down to audio. Audio is very important to get right because otherwise people won't be able to hear you. We want the sample rate to be set to 41.4. I'll let you choose whether you want stereo or mono. Mono is going to save you a little bit of bandwidth and file space, and it's going to sound just fine if it's just people talking. If you're going to have music and sound effects and a lot of other stuff, you may want it to be set to stereo. Now, the desktop audio device 1 and 2, this is just your system sound, so that's anything playing on your computer. If your computer plays a sound when you get an email, or if you're listening to music or a YouTube video, or you're talking with somebody on Skype or Google Hangouts, anything that's playing through your speakers is going to be a desktop audio device. So I like to keep the first desktop audio device at its default. The second one can be disabled. And then the mic/auxiliary audio device is your microphone that will be capturing your voice while you're speaking. So you'll want to set this to whatever your sound card or your audio device is on your computer. And that should be the only other option besides disabled and default, unless you have multiple audio sources. So I'm using an M-Audio FireWire Solo audio input box, which I connect to my microphone to, and then that connects to my computer through FireWire. They also make them for USB. I'm going to select this line 1, 2. That's basically selecting that as my microphone. Now, I don't have multiple microphones, so I'm going to leave these disabled. And then that's everything we need to set in audio. Let's look at video. Now you have your base or your canvas resolution. This big black area would be your canvas, so that would be the maximum size of your composition. Now you have the option to scale that down when you live stream, so you could record it very large and very detailed, but then stream it at a slightly smaller size if you wanted to make it run a bit faster, and then scale it up to that size. Now that sounds really complicated, so long story short, I would recommend that you just set both of these to the same thing. So I'm going to set both of them to 1920 by 1080 because that's the resolution that I want to use for my live stream and for my recording. You don't need to worry about downscale filter, and then you can change your FPS or your frames per second here. I think 30 is fine for what I'm doing, but if you had a lot of really quick motion in your videos, you might want to use 60 frames per second. But again, increasing the frames per second increases the demand on your computer and eats up your bandwidth, which could make your live stream slower. So you want to keep that in mind for all of these settings. Don't set things too high because that's going to make the live stream more laggy. Don't set them too low because then the quality of the video will suffer. Now, hotkeys I'm not going to get into, but I just want to touch on what hotkeys can do. You can program these hotkeys to do anything. You can start the stream, stop the stream, you can switch to a different scene, you can mute your microphone, you can do all kinds of things. So this might be helpful when you get a little more in-depth into using the live stream. Let's go to advanced. You'll want to make sure that automatically reconnect is enabled. That way, in case you lose your connection for a second, it'll automatically reconnect and it won't stop your live stream. So now we want to go ahead and click apply to apply our changes, and then we can click OK. So I know that seemed really complicated, but the good news is that work is done and you won't ever have to configure it again unless you reinstall OBS. Fortunately, you can save your preferences here. You can save profiles and you can save collections of scenes. So I would recommend doing that if you want to back up these settings for later so you don't have to re-input them. Now before we move forward with setting up our scene or building our composition for our live stream here, I want to talk a little bit about the hardware and the software that you might want to use for your live stream. For example, you're going to need a microphone if you want to be able to talk during your live streams. The best microphone to get is a condenser microphone. If you'd like a recommendation, I'm using the Audio-Technica AT4040. You can watch my review of that. Now this particular microphone requires that you have an audio input box, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm using the M-Audio Firewire input box, but you could use any audio input that allows you to connect an XLR microphone. If you don't want to mess around with all that extra equipment, you can get condenser microphones that are powered through USB. The Rode NT and the Rode Podcaster are examples of that. And if you're interested, I'll put links to all of these products that I'm suggesting in the description of this video. Moving on to the webcam, if you want to be able to be seen during your live stream, you're going to need a webcam. And I recommend that you get the Logitech C920 because that's really one of the best webcams. It has 1080 HD resolution. One of the most important pieces of hardware are headphones. You need headphones because if you're planning on having system sound playing like music, sound effects, or audio from your guests, you don't want that audio to come out through your speakers and go back into your microphone because that'll create a feedback or an echo and it'll make your live stream impossible to listen to. So you'll want to plug in headphones or mute your system audio to make sure that you don't get audio feedback. If you're going to be doing digital painting during your live streams, you're going to of course want some art software. I use a variety of art software during my live streams. And last but not least, you'll probably want more than one monitor because if you're going to have your content that you're sharing on your screen, you'll probably want that to be full screen. So if you're going to want to have the chat log open or your YouTube live dashboard open or anything else open, you're going to want to put that on a different screen than the screen that you're recording. So I have 3 screens that I can use, and that gives me plenty of room to do my live stream. But if you want to keep things simple, you can get away with live streaming on just one screen. It's just a little more difficult. Now it's time to set up the scenes, and the scene is what can be seen during your live stream. And right now we don't really have anything. We just have a big blank void here. There's nothing that'll be shown during our live stream. So we have to put stuff here. We have to put the screen that we want to share. We have to put the text that we want to have on the screen during the live stream. We have to place in our webcam somewhere. So down here in the bottom left, you have the scenes palette, and you can add multiple scenes. So you could switch between a scene that has your screen that you're drawing on, and then you could have a second scene that's your webcam full screen, and so on. And you can switch between those scenes on the fly while you're live streaming. Next to scenes, you have sources. And sources are the individual pieces of content or the elements that make up your scene. So within my scene, one of my sources could be my screen capture, another source could be my webcam, and another source could be my logo. So let's go ahead and create a new scene by clicking on the plus icon, and I'm going to call this art stream. That's going to be the name of this scene. We'll need to add some sources to our art stream, so let's click on the plus icon, and we can choose from a number of elements. You can add an image to the screen, you can add media like video, audio, and animation, you can add text to your scene, you can capture a display or a monitor, you can capture a window or part of a window, you can capture a game, you can capture video from a video capture device, you can capture audio from your audio input, or you can capture your audio output. So let's go ahead and start with display capture. That would probably be the most common source that you'd want to add. We can go ahead and give this a name. I'm going to capture my Cintiq. So I'm going to type in Cintiq for the title and click. And all of a sudden we're getting this weird tunneling into infinity effect. And what this is doing is this is showing you the screen capturing the screen, capturing the screen, capturing the screen on into infinity. This is called a feedback loop. So this is why it's good to have more than one screen. And if this is getting really confusing for you and you don't like seeing this feedback loop, you can right click on your screen and you can uncheck enable preview. So now it's not going to show you that preview anymore. You can also right click on it again and choose enable preview. If you want to edit a source, you can click on the gear or you can double click on the source. I'm going to click down here on display and I can switch between my multiple monitors. Display 0 would be my Cintiq. I could also switch it to my other display, which is showing Corel Painter. I'm going to go ahead and leave this on this display. Normally, if I were doing a live stream, I'd want to set this to my Cintiq because that's the display that I'd be drawing on. But because I'm recording this video on my Cintiq, I actually have to set it to my other screen for demonstration purposes. So this is the screen that I'm going to share. I want to share the entire screen. I'll click on OK. Now this works for sharing an entire screen, but what if you just want to share part of the screen? You can do a couple different things. In our composition preview up here, you can see that I have this red box surrounding the screen capture that I just added as an element, and I can drag the corners of this to resize it. I can move it around if I want to reposition it, and I can hold Alt and I can drag to crop it. So let's say maybe I want to crop off this extra stuff up here. I can do that. And then I can take it and I can move it up to the top. And then I have some room down here at the bottom if I wanted to add my website or my logo or something like that. There may be some cases where your content is getting cut off and you may need to go ahead and reposition it. For example, my layers palette is getting a little bit cut off near the bottom here. So what I'd want to do is go to my screen that I'm capturing and maybe condense things down a little bit, shrink that down, and then now I can see the bottom of the layers palette. So you may need to move these windows around a little bit within your capture. The other way to capture just part of a window is to add a source and then choose window capture rather than display capture. I'll go ahead and just call this a window. And then what it's capturing now is the window that I have selected, which is my Camtasia recorder, which I'm using to record right now. But you could choose anything else that's currently open. I'll go ahead and click OK. And then now that's a separate element that I can take and I can move into my composition. I can make it bigger, I can make it smaller, I can crop it, and so on. Now if I don't want this in my scene anymore, I'll just click the minus to remove it from the scene. Let's add some more sources to our scene. I'm going to click on the plus and I'm going to try an image. I'm going to call this overlay. And we'll want to browse to locate the image. I have some images that I created earlier. You'll want to keep in mind that we know our composition is 1920 by 1080 pixels, so any content that we create for our live stream needs to be that size as well. So you could, for example, make a canvas in Photoshop, put in all of your graphics there, and then just export them one by one at the appropriate size. You can add all kinds of file formats here. So I have this overlay that I'm going to add. I'm going to click on Open. That's added in my content. I'm going to click on OK, and then I can take this and I can move it around. Now, because of the way I set this up, I made this a canvas that was 1920 by 1080, but I could also just put in this one little graphic here. I just found that it was easier to position things if I did it this way, but if I wanted to make this bigger or smaller, I could do that. I could scale it up a little bit so that it fits right along the bottom of my video and everything is all matched up. You can see some examples of what you could do with these image overlays. You could have your logo or your website or your Facebook and Patreon and YouTube addresses and everything like that. That way when people watch the live stream, they have an idea of who they're watching and it'll help answer some commonly asked questions, because during your live streams, people will ask you who you are, how do they find your videos, what tablet you're using, what software you're using. So if you can put all that on the screen, it's easier just to point to it and say, you can go to my website down here, aaronrutten.com. Let's go ahead and add another source. Let's add a webcam. I'm going to choose video capture device. I'm going to call this webcam. And now you can see me on the webcam. So you want to make sure that your webcam is selected here. You can configure the video, which I would recommend because that'll give you a few more options. For example, I can zoom in if I want to crop in on my head tighter. I can move the camera up and down, left and right. I have a few options on this particular camera to focus on my face. I can also adjust the focus manually. I can go to advanced settings, and I can play with automatic lighting adjustments, or I can lighten and darken this myself. I can make it brighter if I need to make it brighter, or darker if I need to make it darker. You also might want to flip the view of yourself by clicking on mirrored. That way you're kind of looking in a mirror and it makes it easier and you don't have to try to remember that everything's backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and click on save if I'm happy with these settings. Let's go ahead and click on OK. And just like anything else, we can reposition our webcam and move it somewhere where we want it. I'll put it down here. I can hold Alt and I can crop it down if I want it to be a bit tighter. Reposition it, maybe make it a bit bigger. You can also use the arrow keys to move it up and down by nudging it. Now you may get into some situations where things overlap each other and something disappears, or you can't grab a particular object that you want to grab. Like right now I'm trying to click on the webcam, but it's only grabbing the background. So what I want to do is select this image overlay, which is kind of interfering with everything, and I want to right click on it. I want to choose order, move to bottom. That's going to move it down to the bottom of the order of everything else. That way it's not on. I could add the Cintiq, move that up here, and then this could be my second scene. So while I'm recording the live stream, I could here, and now that we have our scenes set up, them on Skype or Google Hangouts or something, so you may need to adjust their levels with the desktop audio. In my live streams, I don't use any desktop audio, so I usually just have this muted. That way I make sure that there aren't any unexpected sounds that happen, getting louder and louder each time. So I want to turn this up a bit more, and so now my audio is at a much higher level. Let's turn it up to 1000. On here to the bottom right, and we can choose Start Recording. And whatever you say or do during the recording process is going to get recorded. So what I'm saying right now is getting recorded. I'll click on Stop Recording. Say or do. So now that your scenes are all set up and your computer's configured for live streaming, we can move forward with your very first live stream. Let's go back to the YouTube live streaming page for our event that we were on earlier. If you can't find that, you can always go back to your Creator Studio, look under live streaming, and then events. And then if you still have that event that you created, you can click on edit. And now we can go ahead and set up our first test live stream. So I'm just going to call this test stream. The time doesn't really matter. You can add a description if you want to. You could really put anything you want in here, but you would want to describe briefly what the stream is going to be about. And then maybe put in some contact information so people know to subscribe and go to your website and all that stuff. If you have a schedule for your live stream, you could put that in there as well. I'm going to make sure mine's set to private because I don't actually want to stream this since this is just a tutorial. Make sure it's set to custom. You can add some keywords down here at the bottom. If you're doing drawing and painting and art and stuff like that, you would want to add those in. These are just automatic keywords. This isn't what I would add for my live stream, so just kind of ignore these. Same goes for the description. Let's look under advanced settings. If there's anything you want to change here for this particular live stream, you could do that. We looked at all these settings earlier, but again, you may want to change these from time to time. So we want to look here under main camera. You can add a thumbnail, which is a little image that can advertise your live stream before it starts. The suggested size for that is 1280 by 720. I'm not going to add anything for that right now since this is just a test. We want to choose the maximum sustained bitrate for our stream key. We want to copy this. We want to paste this into OBS. So let's go back to OBS. Let's go to settings. Let's go to stream, and we'll paste in our stream key right here. We'll click apply and then OK.